I just watched for the second time on Netflix this movie called The Stanford Prison Experiment. I believe that's what it's called. Um, it's an amazing movie, unbelievable. It really, even if the acting was subpar, it's really about the principles. It starts off as an experiment, of course, it's in the name. So there's two groups of test subjects. There's the prisoners and there's the guards. And both test subjects are made up of random civilians. These are just pretty much teenage boys, teenage to like young adult boys, um, that are just looking for a quick paycheck. They think the experience is just an experiment. You just act out your part for I think a week, and then you go home and you get a fat check. Well, not a fat check, but some money. And so it starts off pretty nonchalant, pretty relaxed. The guards are just saying, stand by the wall. But one of them makes a joke. It's like, no, strip, just for fun, The boys being immature, just fucking around. And eventually, like, it just escalates. And the guards realize there's really no repercussions and no consequences for their actions because uh, what the manager of or I'll just call him the warden. He doesn't play the warden, but basically, there's this guy that just runs the whole experiment. I'll just refer to him as the warden because I forgot his real name and his real role. But he organizes the experiment, and so he's the warden. And I forgot where I was going, but basically, the warden just lets things happen. He lets things escalate. He thinks it's part of the experiment. You got to see how people abuse power and how in jails and real correctional facilities, prisons. Um, this kind of stuff goes on. This kind of behavior with abuse of power from the guards to the prisoners, and eventually you just see these guards, these random people, I guess innocent people, really become monsters because they realize they can do whatever they want, and they really dive into the role of being a guard, and the prisoners are just abused, and they really suffer. They really go through a lot of pain and misery, uh, and the guards just think they're doing their job, they're doing their role. And you just see some of them just break down. They completely lose themselves, and it makes sense. Like it's really for a movie to logically like it's obviously like fun to create this character where you see this arc where they just start off normal and then you see them break down and completely delve into madness. Like I kind of want to do that with if I make a movie, create a character like that, and it was really well executed. It really makes sense why these characters just completely break down and completely lose themselves. Like it's amazing. There's these scenes where people like regular people who are organizing the experiment, they ask the prisoners' names. The prisoners are so engulfed in the role, they've just really lost themselves through all the traumatic experience that the only thing they say is just their number, the number that's on, like the serial number on their dress. It's basically it's a replacement for a jumpsuit, but it's like a dress, and they just say their number. It's crazy, and these people just completely lose themselves. I keep saying it, but it's unbelievable. And then this shit happens, and I shouldn't have swore, but because if I put this on YouTube, you know how it is. Um, but wow, I can't. I'm trying to. I forgot where I was. Um, yeah, but the people who are organizing it just keep letting it happen. They keep like ignoring it. And there's this one guy who was brought onto the experiment who organizes it, and he was a former San Quentin, which is like a really well-known jail, pretty brutal, pretty dangerous, pretty, like really dangerous convicts go there. And he was there for 16 years, and he just really dwells in the role. He's like, I have experience with how the people who run the prisons are. I'm just gonna portray that for the sake of realism. And he just, like, you hate him. You really learn to hate him, and then eventually, you're just so happy once he realizes that he hates himself and that he's become the very thing that he hated. He hated seeing how indifferent and how just brutal and vicious the people running these prisons are. And he's like, I hate myself. I don't want to do this anymore. And so the main warden guy, is like, please, I need you to run this experiment with me. And so the San Quentin guy goes, just release the guy that wants bail. He wants bail, so or like let him be on parole. And parole is basically let him go from the experiment. Just let him go, and you'll see throughout the movie, just these people want to leave the experiment so bad. They just want to. They're done. They give up. They don't. It's not worth the money. It's not worth anything. It's really just suffering. It's like hell, and they're not really granted it because the people who organize the experiment want to keep it real, want to make sure it's like real. Because if you, I kind of get the logic. It's pretty evil, but I get the logic. Because if you let someone go, then it breaks the sense of realism. Then the other prisoners are gonna be like, oh, I could just ask for my release, whatever, and then the experiment's basically done. It's tainted. It's flawed by that point because you lose the sense of realism knowing that you can just go. Like you really need to really get like it becomes a different experiment. I'll explain that in a sec, but um, it would break the realism if you just let them go, and eventually the experiment just turns into seeing the abuse of power to seeing how far you could push a person before they break, or just even past that, just really pushing a person until they call a lawyer, basically just studying human behavior and seeing how suffering affects people. Like it becomes a completely different experiment. And the guy's just so dedicated, so immersed, the warden, so immersed, he's amazed. It's actually really interesting, I understand. And you don't really want to break that. It's really groundbreaking stuff. It's like two experiments. The first experiment is again studying the how normal citizens would react in the two roles, being a prisoner and being a guard, and then second is just seeing how just how much suffering someone can take, and just watching, just studying how people can become from normal people to just broken down shells of themselves. And it's amazing. It truly is. And then the last scene of the movie, basically the last scene, I call it the last scene. There's like some epilogue stuff, but again, spoiler. It's not that big of a spoiler, but it kind of is. So, spoiler alert. So the guy eventually, he's like, all right, I lost my girlfriend to this. My girlfriend saw this, what this experiment has become, and she saw that I'm basically supporting it. So she's gone. I'm he's he even sees in himself that he's becoming the monster by letting this happen. So he just walks into the room where this experiment's happening. It's a hallway with, some jail cells and the hole. If you watch the movie, you'll understand the hole. I'm sure you can understand just by context clues and the name the hole. You've seen that in other movies. Anyway, unimportant. So he walks into the hallway, the warden, and he says, this experiment's over. Stanford County Jail is closed for business. Everyone's free to leave. And so this guy, one of the main antagonists, the correctional officer that just completely immerses himself. He even puts on a southern accent. He just becomes so brutal, such a terrible person, and he completely abuses his role of authority. And you just see him snap back to his old self. And you could tell he does that because he says, so are we not getting paid for the full week? And it's amazing. It's absolutely stunning. He becomes his normal self as if nothing happened, as if all the abuse And you'll watch the movie. You should watch the movie. It's on Netflix. And you'll see, like, he's just become a completely different person through this role. He's just a completely evil madman, basically. And it's just like that. It's turned off, basically, like that. And he's back to his normal self. And it's amazing. And then it's just unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story. It's an unbelievable study of what people can become, how people can abuse authority. I mean, if the purge was every day, you think there'd be some good people, obviously, out there, but there'd be so many people that you would think that would just be perfectly fine and just be in their normal selves. And if they had like a role of authority, if they really had the power, and if they don't have any consequences to worry about, they'll just become the worst part of themselves, something they never thought they could be. They'll just abuse everything. They'll become so selfish, and it really speaks for how like governments work and how people we elect in these roles of authority just become so terrible. And, like celebrity, like it's just amazing. All these people that we think are so terrible, it's really the power that corrupts you and the authority. Like they're probably normal people if we saw them like at their beginning, at their humble beginnings, where they didn't have this power and authority. Yet the power just corrupts you. You have so much freedom, and we just turn into these savages, these absolute animals, where we don't care about other people. We don't have that sense of empathy. And I don't know. It's just like if the rules weren't there, if the laws weren't there, can you 100% say that you wouldn't, like, I don't know. If you had the authority and there was no consequences, like, would you say with absolute certainty that you'd be still be a good person?